Have you ever looked into the soft white light of your refrigerator at midnight and realized that among those colorful containers lies a hidden predator, one that is quietly eroding the very foundation of who you are? As I sit here in my study, the dim glow of the lamp reflecting off the medical journals piled on my desk, I am reminded of the 30,000 faces I have treated over my 3 decades as a physician. Each face was a map of a life lived, a collection of weddings, lullabies, and hard-earned wisdom. But for too many of those people, particularly those who have crossed the threshold of 60 years, that map was being slowly erased, not by time itself, but by an unsuspecting guest in their own kitchen. You see, the tragedy of aging in America isn't just about the joints that ache or the hair that turns to silver. It is the terrifying, silent disappearance of the self. I have spent my life as Dr.
Sanjay Gupta navigating the intricate canyons of the human brain, and yet it still breaks my heart to see a brilliant mind flicker and dim because of a simple, honest mistake made at the grocery store. You bought that item thinking you were nourishing your vitality, perhaps even following the outdated advice of a well-meaning nutritionist, but for the aging brain, that choice is akin to pouring salt onto a delicate rose. I remember standing in the sterile hallway of the clinic, watching a daughter guide her father by the elbow because he had forgotten which door led to the exit, a man who, just 5 years prior, was a lead architect designing the skylines of our great cities. It is a specific kind of agony to witness a human being become a stranger to their own history. And what is truly haunting is that it is often preventable. People come to me every day, their voices trembling with a mixture of confusion and suppressed terror, asking why their mental sharpness is deserting them despite their commitment to a healthy lifestyle. They eat their fruits, they take long walks through the sun-dappled parks, and they stay engaged with their grandchildren, yet they feel a thick gray fog rolling over their thoughts. The shocking truth that the food industry spends billions of dollars to obscure is that not all fruits are created equal once you reach your 6th decade of life. While some fruits act as a divine fuel for your neurons, sharpening the edges of your memory like a whetstone, others act as a biological toxin. These deceptive fruits spike your blood sugar to levels your aging pancreas can no longer manage, triggering a cascade of inflammation that scorches your brain tissue and accelerates the very cognitive decline you are desperately trying to outrun. What I am revealing to you tonight goes against the grain of everything you have been told, but my evidence isn't just found in textbooks. It is found in the living, breathing transformations of my patients. I have seen individuals who could no longer remember where they placed their car keys suddenly begin to recall detailed conversations from 3 weeks ago with startling clarity. I have watched men and women who struggled to follow the simple instructions on a box of pasta regain the cognitive stamina to manage complex financial tasks or rediscover the joy of a challenging chess match. This isn't magic, and it isn't a miracle drug. It is the profound power of understanding which fruits are your allies and which are your enemies in the battle for your mind. Your brain after 60 is in a state of exquisite vulnerability, a period where the margin for error becomes razor thin.
If you value your independence, if you cherish the ability to recognize the love in your spouse's eyes, and if you want to keep the flame of your intellect burning bright, you must realize that what you put in your shopping cart is a vote for or against your future self. Statistics from leading clinical research institutions show that the natural aging process already reduces the vital blood flow to your neurons by nearly 15% by the time you reach 60. Your brain's glymphatic system, that essential nocturnal cleaning crew responsible for flushing out toxic proteins like amyloid beta, begins to lose its efficiency. The protective blood-brain barrier, once a fortress, becomes more like a porous fence, allowing systemic inflammation to seep into your thinking centers. This means that a piece of fruit that caused a negligible rise in your blood sugar 20 years ago can now send your glucose levels soaring, triggering a neurochemical firestorm that directly damages the hippocampus, the sacred hall of records where your new memories are formed. We are talking about the difference between living your final decades in the sunlit clarity of your own home versus the sterile, echoing halls of an assisted living facility. By the end of our journey together, I will identify the 5 fruits that are actively sabotaging your gray matter and the 5 restorative fruits that can help shield you from the shadows of dementia. The final fruit I will share has been the catalyst for reversing what many thought was irreversible memory loss, providing a beacon of hope for those who felt they were already lost at sea. Your brain has carried you faithfully through 60 years of storms and triumphs. It is time for you to finally return the favor and give it the protection it so desperately deserves. To understand why the fruits in your bowl can suddenly turn into silent adversaries, you must first visualize the magnificent yet fragile landscape of your brain as it enters the golden years. Imagine a historic grand library, one that has stood for over 60 years, housing every conversation you have ever had, every face you have ever loved, and every skill you have ever mastered. When you reach the age of 60, the structural integrity of this library begins to change in ways that are invisible to the naked eye, but devastating in their precision. As a physician who has spent decades peering into the microscopic reality of neural pathways, I can tell you that the aging brain is not simply a slower version of its younger self. It is an entirely different biological ecosystem. Clinical data from Harvard and leading neuro research centers indicate that by this stage of life, the natural volume of blood flow to your neurons has diminished by nearly 15%. This isn't just a number, it means that every single thought you process is competing for a dwindling supply of oxygen and glucose. The cleaning crew of your brain, that sophisticated system designed to wash away the metabolic waste and toxic proteins that accumulate during the day, begins to fatigue. The drainage pipes are getting clogged, and the once impenetrable fortress known as the blood-brain barrier is beginning to fray at the edges, becoming more like a permeable curtain than a solid wall of defense. This biological shift means that the inflammation which your body once handled with ease in your 30s or 40s now lingers like a toxic smog over your thinking centers. Think back to 20 years ago. Your body was a resilient machine that could process a high-sugar snack with a quick surge of insulin and move on. But today, a fruit that barely caused a ripple in your blood sugar back then can now trigger a tidal wave of glucose that stays elevated for hours. This isn't just a metabolic inconvenience, it is a direct assault on the hippocampus, the sacred curved structure deep within your temporal lobes that acts as the gateway for new memories. When blood sugar remains chronically high, it creates a scorched earth effect, causing a measurable shrinkage of this vital region. I have sat with patients and reviewed their high-resolution MRI scans, pointing to the dark, hollow spaces where vibrant neural tissue used to be, all because of persistent, diet-induced inflammation. It is a sobering sight to see a man's ability to recall his granddaughter's graduation diminished because the protective barriers of his brain were too weak to hold back the inflammatory storm of a healthy breakfast. The connection between the food on your plate and the structural integrity of your mind becomes more critical with every passing year. We are navigating a reality where the choice of what you put in your shopping cart can literally determine whether you will spend your 80th year sharing stories with your family or staring blankly at a wall, unable to find the words for water or love. Recent longitudinal studies have shown that individuals who consume high-sugar fruits on a regular basis experience a rate of cognitive decline that is nearly 40% faster than those who stick to low-sugar, antioxidant-rich alternatives. The difference is profound. It is the difference between maintaining your dignity and independence versus requiring help with the most basic daily tasks of survival. You must realize that your brain at this age no longer has the luxury of cheat days. Every spike in sugar is a tiny earthquake in the delicate architecture of your memory. As your doctor, I want you to see this not as a reason to fear, but as a reason to take command. You are the architect of your own library, and though the walls are aging, you still hold the power to choose the materials that will keep the roof from caving in. We must respect this vulnerability, for it is only through deep understanding that we can find the path back to clarity. I often think of Martha Henderson, a woman whose life was as rich and textured as the Savannah streets she had walked for 78 years. Martha was a retired school teacher, a woman who had once commanded classrooms with her sharp wit and an encyclopedic memory for every student's name. When she first sat in the leather chair in my office, she looked small, her eyes clouded with a kind of quiet desperation that hit me harder than any clinical diagnosis ever could. She clutched a worn photograph of her late husband, Frank, her knuckles white with the effort. "Dr. Gupta," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry parchment. "I can't hear him anymore. I try to remember the way he used to call my name in the morning, but it's like a radio station fading into static. I feel like I'm losing him all over again." Martha had been doing everything right. Ba kept herself active with the church choir, walked her golden retriever every morning, and prided herself on having a healthy dessert of canned fruit cocktail instead of the butter-laden cookies her friends enjoyed. She thought she was making the smart choice, but she was unknowingly feeding a silent thief. The tragedy lay in those small, convenient plastic cups of fruit cocktail. While the fruit itself might have once been nutritious, it was now swimming in a heavy, viscous syrup composed primarily of high fructose corn syrup and concentrated juices. For a woman of Martha's age, this was a lethal dose of sugar delivered directly to her bloodstream. Within minutes of eating, her blood sugar would spike to levels that her aging pancreas struggled to control. Unlike a fresh peach, where the natural fiber acts as a rhythmic pacer for sugar absorption, this processed fruit hit her system like a sledgehammer. What happens next is a devastating chemical chain reaction that is invisible to the eye, but catastrophic for the mind. To combat the sugar, her body would release a flood of insulin, a hormone that doesn't just stay in the body, it crosses into the brain. Over years of this twice-daily habit, Martha's neurons had become resistant to these insulin signals. Her brain cells were surrounded by glucose, yet they were literally starving to death because they could no longer use that fuel for energy. Her thinking became foggy, her memory retrieval slowed to a crawl, and the simple task of recalling her husband's voice became a monumental struggle. Clinical studies have shown that the regular consumption of high fructose corn syrup is linked to a significant acceleration of cognitive decline in older adults, often mimicking the early stages of dementia. The inflammation triggered by these healthy snacks creates a pattern of damage that compounds over months and years, slowly eroding the neural pathways responsible for complex thought. When I looked at Martha's diet, I saw a roller coaster of blood sugar patterns that would have exhausted a 20-year-old, let alone a woman in her late 70s. I asked her to make one simple change: throw away the cans and replace them with a handful of fresh, tart berries. The transformation was nothing short of breathtaking. Within only 6 weeks, the static she described began to clear. Her daughter called me, sobbing with relief, to say that Martha had spent the afternoon recounting stories of her and Frank's wedding in 1965, details she hadn't mentioned in years. Martha stopped losing her train of thought mid-sentence. The sharp, vibrant teacher I knew was beginning to resurface from the fog. This is the power of removing a hidden threat. It wasn't about adding a miracle drug, but about stopping the daily poisoning of a beautiful mind. Arthur Miller, or Artie, as everyone on the Boston docks called him, was a man built of granite and salt air. At 82, he still carried the broad shoulders of a laborer, but when he walked into my examination room, he seemed strangely diminished, as if the vibrant man inside was retreating into a smaller and smaller shell. Artie was a man of habit. For 30 years, he started every single morning with 2 large glasses of premium, 100% natural orange juice. He saw it as his morning medicine, his dose of vitamin C to keep his old bones moving. But as I sat across from him, I saw the telltale signs of a brain under siege. He would reach for a word, something simple like wrench or anchor, and his hand would hover in the air, his fingers grasping at nothing while his eyes filled with a terrifying vacancy. "Doc," he told me, his voice gravelly and heavy with shame. "It's like the lights are flickering in my head. I know what I want to say, but the bridge is out. I feel like my very world is shrinking." What Artie didn't realize, and what many Americans over 60 fail to understand, is the biological violence that fruit juice inflicts on an aging brain. When you strip away the fiber of the orange to create a liquid extract, you are essentially creating a delivery system for pure fructose and glucose that bypasses all of the body's natural defenses. Think of it this way. Artie would never sit down and eat 4 or 5 oranges in 2 minutes. Yet that is exactly the sugar load he was dumping into his system every morning. Without the fiber to slow it down, that sugar hits the bloodstream with a speed that the aging brain cannot handle. Research following thousands of older adults over a decade has provided sobering evidence. Those who consume fruit juice daily show significantly faster rates of brain shrinkage, particularly in the hippocampus, the very center Artie needed to find his words and navigate his day. Even more chillingly, daily juice consumption has been linked to a smaller total brain volume in people over 60. Artie wasn't just losing his words, he was physically losing the tissue of his mind.
The culprit behind this shrinkage is a process scientists call glycation. When excess sugar circulates in the blood of an 82-year-old, it begins to bind to the proteins in the brain tissue, forming harmful, sticky compounds that damage both neurons and the delicate blood vessels that feed them. This process effectively accelerates the aging of the brain, turning a healthy 80-year-old mind into one that resembles a 95-year-old's. I explained to Artie that while he thought he was getting vitamins, he was actually flooding his memory center with liquid sugar. I asked him to make a deal with me: stop the juice and eat 2 whole oranges instead. The difference in his fasting blood sugar was almost immediate, but the change in his mental clarity was the real victory. Within 3 months, the flickering lights in his head became steady once more. His wife mentioned that he had started telling his old doc stories again with every detail and name intact.
Artie didn't need a new medication. He just needed to stop drowning his neurons in a morning ritual that was stealing his essence drop by drop.
Eleanor Vance was a woman who lived for the quiet magic of a well-told story. A retired librarian from Portland, she spent her 74th year surrounded by mountains of mystery novels. But lately, the mysteries had become far too real. She came to see me because she found herself holding a book she had been reading for a week, unable to remember who the protagonist was or what had happened in the previous chapter. Eleanor was a person of discipline. She avoided processed sweets and kept a bag of dried mango strips and dates by her reading chair, believing she was choosing nature's candy over the poisons of the candy aisle. "Sanjay," she said, her eyes filling with tears as she looked at her bookshelf, "I feel like a librarian who has lost the index to her own life. Everything is there, but I can't find it. I thought I was being so healthy with my snacks." She was heartbroken, fearing that the early shadows of Alzheimer's were finally closing in on her.
The deception of dried fruit is one of the most pervasive myths in the modern diet, especially for those over 60. When you remove the water from a fruit, you are left with an incredibly dense package of concentrated natural sugars with almost no volume to trigger the fullness signals in your brain. A single handful of raisins, for example, can contain more sugar than a standard chocolate bar. For Eleanor, her habit of snacking on 6 or 7 dates throughout the afternoon was sending her blood glucose higher than if she had eaten a glazed donut. Her body didn't care that the sugar was natural. It responded with a massive insulin surge that placed immense stress on her brain's energy-producing mitochondria. Furthermore, many commercially dried fruits are treated with sulfites to maintain their vibrant color. For an aging brain, these sulfites can be a hidden neurotoxin, interfering with the absorption of essential minerals like magnesium and zinc, the very nutrients Eleanor needed to maintain neural plasticity and cognitive speed. The result of Eleanor's healthy habit was a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation in the tiny blood vessels of her brain. This inflammation impairs the delivery of oxygen to the neurons, making every mental task feel like wading through deep water. I sat with her and calculated that her daily snack habit was adding over 40 grams of concentrated sugar to her system, sugar that her 74-year-old metabolism simply couldn't clear. I urged her to trade the dried mango for fresh, crisp apple slices with their skins intact. The shift was like turning on a light in a darkened room. Within 2 months, the fog she described began to lift. She returned to my office not with a look of fear, but with a smile, eager to tell me about the complex plot of the thriller she had just finished. Her memory hadn't been lost to a disease. It had been suffocated by a concentrated sugar habit that was masquerading as health food.
By returning to the simple, water-rich fruit of nature, she had restored the index to her own life's library. As we navigate the complexities of aging, there is a certain allure to the exotic, the vibrant oranges of a ripe mango, the golden sweetness of a pineapple, the lush softness of a papaya. These tropical fruits are often marketed as the ultimate superfoods, packed with enzymes and vitamins that promise to rejuvenate the body. However, as a physician who has witnessed the metabolic struggles of 30,000 patients, I must tell you that for the brain over 60, these fruits can be a seductive trap. The reality is that tropical fruits have been selectively bred over decades to be far sweeter and more sugar-dense than the wild fruits our ancestors consumed. A single large mango can contain over 40 grams of sugar, which is nearly the same amount found in a 12-ounce can of soda.
For an older adult, starting the day with a large tropical smoothie bowl topped with granola is not a healthy start. It is an inflammatory sugar bomb that sets the brain up for a day of energy crashes and cognitive failure.
The problem is compounded by the fact that many of us develop a degree of insulin resistance as we age, often without any outward symptoms. The mango that your 40-year-old body processed with ease now causes a prolonged spike in blood glucose that can last for hours at age 65.
This repeated spiking and crashing is particularly damaging to the neural pathways in the frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for concentration, decision-making, and executive function. When your blood sugar is on this roller coaster, your brain's ability to clear out toxic waste products during sleep is severely impaired. Longitudinal research from international institutes has shown that older adults who fall into the highest category of fruit sugar consumption perform measurably worse on memory tests and show more advanced signs of brain aging on neuroimaging scans. They aren't just getting older, they are accelerating the clock through their dietary choices. I often have to have difficult conversations with patients who are proud of their fruit-heavy diets. They don't understand that by consuming these high-sugar tropical delights as a daily staple, they are putting their mental independence at risk. Chronic elevation of blood sugar creates a persistent state of inflammation in the brain's delicate vascular system, reducing the suppleness of the blood vessels and making it harder for nutrients to reach the neurons. I'm not suggesting that you must never taste a pineapple again, but I am urging you to treat these fruits as a rare indulgence rather than a dietary foundation. Your brain functions best on stable, steady blood sugar, not the erratic peaks and valleys created by tropical sugars. By shifting your focus to lower sugar options like berries or green apples, you provide your neurons with a calm, consistent energy source. This simple change can be the difference between a decade of mental clarity and a decade of confusing inflammatory fog. Your brain thrives on stability, and it is your job to provide it. Robert Bob Thompson was a man who lived by the precision of his tools. A retired carpenter from Austin, Texas, his hands were a map of scars and calluses, evidence of 85 years of hard, honest work. But Bob came to me because the precision was slipping, his hands were shaky, and more importantly, his mind felt blunt, as he put it. Bob had recently tried to improve his health by swapping his afternoon potato chip habit for what he thought was a superior alternative: natural banana and apple chips. He felt virtuous about the change, but he didn't realize that these processed fruit snacks were a wolf in sheep's clothing. Most fruit chips are not simply dried, they are deep fried in low-quality vegetable oils like palm or refined sunflower oil, and often dusted with extra sugar to enhance their crunch. Bob was unknowingly consuming a combination of oxidized fats and concentrated sugar, perhaps the single most destructive pairing for an aging human brain. As we age, our brain becomes increasingly sensitive to oxidized fats. The high heat frying process used to create those healthy fruit chips damages the molecular structure of the oils, creating inflammatory compounds that can easily cross the weakened blood-brain barrier of an 85-year-old. When you combine these damaged fats with a high sugar load, you create a double assault on the brain's cognitive centers. The sugar triggers insulin resistance and spikes glucose, while the oxidized fats contribute to the accumulation of amyloid plaques, the sticky proteins that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Bob's mental sluggishness wasn't just old age. It was a neuroinflammatory response to the toxins he was eating every afternoon. "Sanjay," he told me, his eyes filled with a heartbreaking frustration, "I feel like the wood is grainier than it used to be. I can't see the line I'm supposed to cut. I'm losing the one thing I know how to do." I've seen this pattern in countless patients. The virtuous switch to processed fruit products that actually worsens their condition. These snacks have had all the protective fiber removed, making them addictively easy to overeat. Before he knew it, Bob was consuming the sugar equivalent of 6 bananas, along with a heavy dose of inflammatory fat in a single sitting. I asked Bob to put down the bags of chips and return to the basics: a whole, fresh apple and a handful of raw, unroasted walnuts. The transformation was slow but steady. As we cooled the fires of inflammation in his system, his mental clarity began to return. His cholesterol numbers, which had been creeping up, began to stabilize, and his energy levels leveled out. Within a few months, Bob returned to his woodshop, his hands steady enough to carve a small jewelry box for his great-granddaughter. He had regained his edge not through a pharmacy, but by recognizing that if a fruit doesn't look like it came from a tree, it shouldn't be in his body. In all my 30 years of practicing medicine, if there is one fruit that I would label as a true miracle for the aging mind, it is the humble blueberry. These small, deep indigo spheres are more than just food. They are a sophisticated form of neuroprotective medicine provided by the earth itself. The secret lies in their extraordinary concentration of anthocyanins, the pigments that give them their rich color. But anthocyanins do something that almost no other nutrient can. They possess a key that allows them to pass through the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the sanctuary of your brain, They act as a specialized repair crew. They seek out areas of inflammation and neutralize them, protecting your neurons from the daily oxidative stress that leads to memory loss. Clinical research has demonstrated that older adults who consume blueberries just a few times a week show measurable improvements in cognitive testing in as little as 12 weeks. The impact of these berries isn't just a temporary boost, it is a long-term fortification of your mental fortress. One landmark study followed thousands of seniors over several decades and found that those who regularly ate blueberries reduced their risk of developing dementia by nearly 45% compared to those who did not. This is a staggering statistic, one that no pharmaceutical drug has yet been able to match. Anthocyanins appear to protect the specific regions of the brain responsible for encoding and retrieving memories, while also improving the talk between neurons. They even seem to stimulate the production of new neural connections, a process we call neuroplasticity, which was once thought to be impossible in people over 60. I have watched patients who were once drifting into a silent, confused withdrawal start to re-engage with the world after making blueberries a daily ritual.
I recall a woman who struggled to remember the details of her own son's weekly visits. After 2 months of adding half a cup of frozen blueberries to her morning oatmeal, she began to recount their conversations with such accuracy that her son was moved to tears. She hadn't just gotten better, her brain was finally receiving the specific tools it needed to repair its own communication lines. The beauty of this blue medicine is that it is accessible to everyone. Frozen blueberries are often picked at the peak of ripeness and flash frozen, meaning they can actually contain more anthocyanins than the fresh ones that have been sitting on a shelf for a week. I tell my patients, if you want to protect your independence and keep the flame of your memory burning bright, make these berries a non-negotiable part of your life. Your brain is hungry for the protection they offer, and it will reward you with a clarity that you may have thought was gone forever.
The brain is the most energy-demanding organ in the human body. Though it represents only 2% of your weight, it consumes over 20% of your oxygen and nutrients. To keep your mind sharp into your 80s, you must focus on the plumbing, the intricate network of blood vessels that deliver this vital fuel. This is where the pomegranate earns its status as a master of circulation. Pomegranates are brimming with punicensins, powerful antioxidants that have a unique ability to help the delicate lining of your arteries relax and dilate. For a person over 60 whose vessels may have become stiff or narrowed, this improved blood flow is a lifeline. Research has shown that regular consumption of pomegranate leads to measurable increases in blood flow to the memory centers of the brain. I've seen patients who complained of brain fog and a heavy head find a new sense of lightness and mental endurance simply by incorporating pomegranate seeds into their diet. Then we must look to the humble apple, a fruit so common we often forget its profound power. However, there is a catch. You must eat the skin. The skin of the apple is the primary source of quercetin, a flavonoid that acts as a neuroguardian, shielding your brain cells from the oxidative damage that leads to cognitive decline. Quercetin stabilizes the membranes of your neurons, making them more resilient against the toxins and inflammatory molecules that circulate in our modern world. Apples also provide pectin, a soluble fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. We are now learning that a healthy gut is directly linked to a healthy brain. The gut-brain axis means that when you nourish your microbiome with apple fiber, you are actually lowering the inflammation levels in your head. I have encouraged hundreds of patients to adopt the apple-a-day habit, and the results are consistently reliable.
One gentleman in his 80s told me that after 3 months of eating an apple with breakfast, he felt more mentally present than he had in a decade. Finally, we cannot overlook the kiwi fruit, a true antioxidant powerhouse. This small, fuzzy fruit contains more vitamin C than an orange, along with significant amounts of vitamin E and folate. This combination works synergistically to neutralize free radicals before they can damage your brain cell membranes. Vitamin C is essential for the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which regulate both your mood and your memory. Because kiwi has a low glycemic index, it provides these benefits without the dangerous sugar spikes that tropical fruits cause. I've worked with people who felt constantly exhausted and unable to focus, only to see their mental stamina return after adding 2 kiwis to their daily routine. These 3 fruits, pomegranate, apple, and kiwi, form a trifecta of protection that nourishes your circulation, guards your neurons, and stabilizes your energy. They are the simple, effective tools that nature has provided to help you maintain the magnificent library of your mind. Finally, we come to a fruit that is often misunderstood, yet it is perhaps the most essential fuel for a brain that has crossed the 70-year mark: the avocado. Grace Montgomery was a woman who had spent her life leading choirs in Charleston, her world a tapestry of harmony and rhythm. But at 80, Grace felt the music was leaving her. She was struggling with mental sluggishness and a terrifying inability to remember the names of the choir members she had known for decades. Sanjay, she told me, her voice trembling with a quiet grief. The song is still there, but I can't find the notes anymore. I feel like I'm fading away. When I looked at Grace's life, I saw a woman who was avoiding fats out of a misplaced fear of heart disease, leaving her brain, which is nearly 60% fat, literally starving for the structural building blocks it needed to function. I asked Grace to start eating half an avocado every single morning. Unlike almost every other fruit, the avocado is rich in monounsaturated fats, which are essential for maintaining the fluidity of your neural membranes. These healthy fats make it easier for your neurons to send and receive signals, which translates directly into faster thinking and better memory retrieval. Avocados are also a prime source of lutein, a carotenoid that has been specifically linked in clinical trials to improved cognitive performance in older adults. People with higher levels of lutein in their systems perform significantly better on tests of memory and processing speed. For Grace, the results were transformative. Within just a few weeks of adding these quality fats to her diet, she returned to my office with a brightness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "The music is back, Doc," she said, a tear of joy tracing a path through the wrinkles of her cheek. "I can see the notes again." As your doctor, and as someone who has walked this journey with 30,000 souls, I want to leave you with a clear roadmap for your own journey home to clarity. We must stop the daily assault on our minds. We must cast aside the dangerous five: the canned fruits and syrup that drown your neurons in sugar, the fruit juices that shrink your memory center, the dried fruits that act as concentrated inflammation, the overly sweet tropical fruits that cause metabolic chaos, and the processed fruit chips that poison your brain with oxidized fats. These are the thieves that steal your independence and your memories. Instead, I want you to embrace the protective five: the blueberries that repair your communication lines, the pomegranates that nourish your circulation, the apples that shield your neurons, the kiwis that provide essential antioxidants, and the avocados that rebuild the very structure of your mind. The choice you make at the grocery store today is a vote for the person you will be 10 years from now. Brain health isn't a matter of luck or a roll of the dice. It is the cumulative result of thousands of small, consistent choices. Your brain has carried you faithfully for over 60 years, holding every laughter, every lesson, and every love you have ever known. It is your most precious possession, the seat of your very soul. It is time for you to return the favor by giving it the protection and the fuel it desperately needs to stay strong. Do not wait for the shadows of forgetfulness to deepen before you act. Start tomorrow morning with a handful of berries and a slice of avocado. Invest in your clarity, your dignity, and your legacy. If you have found value in this journey we have taken together today, I urge you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of those dedicated to aging with strength and wisdom. We are in this together, and together we will keep the music playing for all the years to come. God bless you, and keep your mind sharp.